Hey, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now in today's video, I want to go through and break down each class for PvP, Magicka and Stamina, and go through and just tell you kind of what do I think of each class. Is it good? Is it bad? Kind of where does it excel? Where's it a bit eh? And like with all of these things, they are personal preference, but with obviously what I do, I always cross-reference it with other players. So I've checked them with Zidane. Is there no one else? And loads of people in his Discord. He's got 1,200 members, so do check that out if you theory craft. And this will really give you a good idea of what's your class good or bad at and where to build into it. There's a bit of variation with anything, you know, you could go a little bit more, a little bit less in one or two things, but this just gives you a really good way to compare Magicka to Magicka, Magicka to Stamina, and see what is really, really good. And if you like these kind of videos and you do want to get better at ESO, then do consider subscribing as we post regular ESO content. Now with that out of the way, let's jump straight in. Now in Greymoor, Magicka Dragonknight is in a really odd place. In certain situations it's really good, like in duels where they've got access to really good crowd control, being able to control your opponent, dot them up. It's really hard to fight against, so they excel particularly in duels. But as you kind of add more and more people, they get less and less effective, as you can see from the ranking on the left. You also find that kind of the damage isn't bursty, it's kind of sustained, which, you know, it works. It's particularly good in no CP with Malakath and Overwhelm Surge or Hrothgar or Elfbane, so that's where they really shine. But they're kind of very dependent on procs to kind of confirm kills. So in a one-on-one, they can get a kill, outnumbered, they're lacking, and for kind of group support, they don't really bring massives. They've got access to chains, which is useful for big groups, and you know, the Dragonknight standard, but beyond that, they don't bring massive else, and they don't really bring any good group heals, and kind of their self-healing is questionable at best, which obviously it's due a buff in the next patch. So all in all, you know, Magicka Dragonknight, it's good in kind of battlegrounds and no CP, but kind of bigger groups in Cyrodiil, it has less and less effect. And you're kind of better off going with a heavy attack build, which is on the channel. You know, that's going to help you at range. You know, got good sustain with it. So all in all, I wouldn't say go make one today. They're not bad, but you're kind of very reliant on procs in order to just confirm kills. So for me, they're not the best class currently. Now for Stamina Dragonknight on Greymoor, it's actually still pretty good. The kind of healing nerfs have affected loads of classes in all honesty, and DK has been impacted by this, yes, but because they have access to major mending so easily, it really kind of helps overcome that, and it just means that compared to the other classes, they can bounce back a bit more quicker. You can go in heavy armor, you get obviously the healing received passives there, you got all the healing passives as a DK, you got major mending, so it means that your self heals are actually pretty good. And you also heal on your ultimate cast, which is actually really, really important. Like, people don't factor that in. It's one of the classes that actually has really high burst potential with Leap. Leap's probably the hardest hitting ult in the game currently. And I know people go, well, you know, Leap's balanced, and it is in all honesty. They don't have a delayed burst skill like Subterranean Assault, Blast Bones, Stamina Sorcerer is getting one next patch with the Crushing Weapon. So, sorry, Crystallized Weapon. So DK kind of needs an extra oomph on the ultimate, which is obviously Leap, so that really kind of helps. As for kind of the dots and stuff, because people can't heal as much, dots are way better than they used to be. And so in duels and in solo and Cyrodiil and stuff, they're really good because you've got burst if you want, or you've got dots to keep them low so you can just execute them easily. As for kind of groups, you've got obviously Leap, which is crazy burst, so it's really good for AoE damage and group support. You've got access to a Noxious Breath, which in all honesty is it's a bit overtuned in my eyes because it hits for like 10k initial hit with a 25k dot. It's one of the best kind of just skills in the game. So yeah, that's really strong, which means you've got, again, a good AoE spammable, but you've got Leap as well, so you can pair them together. It gives you Major Fracture, which gives you more damage. And on top of all that kind of just raw damage that it has, it's also really tanky with the passives they get. You know, they're actually one of the hardest classes to kill. They've got access to Dragonknight Wings, which basically makes them reduce range damage, which, if you're unaware, is a 50% damage reduction. So if you're going against a Sorcerer, you reduce their damage by 50%, and against any Magicka build, pretty much it's a 50% damage reduction, which is huge. And then one morph makes you shoot, you know, fireballs back to damage people, so people can't attack you as easily as they could. So for me, they're one of the more bulky type classes. Sustain wise, it's actually pretty good again because of the Mountain's because of the Battle Roar passive, sorry, where if you use your ultimate, you get resources back. So in my eyes, and from speaking to other people, they're still one of the better classes, especially for kind of 1vx and sort of solo play. And in groups, they still bring a fair bit because of Noxious Breath, you shift in standard or leap, they've got loads of AoE damage, they've got access to minor brutality for the group, they can also give major sorcery and major brutality to obviously the whole group with molten armaments or molten weapons. So for me, they're actually a really good class, and if you have one lying about, go on it, give it a go and see what you think. As for Magicka Necromancer in Greymoor, it's in a really odd place, in all honesty. It's one of those classes that has lots of potential, but the class kit is really awkward. And you can also see there's two different modes. There's like a red one and a blue one. And in all honesty, they have different playstyles. If you spec into Harmony, so you use Graveyard, you use your Colossus ult, you will find generally that you'll have a better kind of time with it, because it's the only way to really get any kind of effectiveness from this. And you obviously get more group utility as a result, because you can obviously synergize with other people. There's obviously built on the channel that does this really, really well. The issue I have with it is that it's just really unreliable. The potential, which keep it potential, if you land the burst combo, it hits really, really hard. Meteor, Blast Bones, Elemental Weapon, you can like melt people. But landing all of that at once is really clunky, and that's why it's potential. Their single target damage is just not reliable. They don't have a good stun. The only saving grace they have is they're incredibly tanky, and they also have some good group utility with access to lots of heals, some of the best heals in the game. They've got really good, stuns which give you minor protection, and it's on the spot where you are. So in a Zerg or in a group, you can drop it down. Anybody that pushes into you will get stunned, so it's really hard to kind of counter a Necromancer dropping that fear totem. So as you can kind of see, the more people there are, the better they get. So for duels, hit and miss because skills are unreliable, solo serials non-existent, but the more players you add on your side, the better and better they get, because you've got more synergies you can synergize with should you go with Harmony, but you also have really good buffs that you can apply to the group, heals, major vulnerability. So for me, Necromancer, Magicka especially, is in a really odd place where if they fixed, Blast Bones particularly, it will be one of the best Magicka classes, but that is the one thing that really holds it back. And with the incoming nerf to Harmony, it's going to kind of be less effective next patch as well. So, if you've got one, they're fun to play, but they're by no means, meta or the most effective class, in my opinion. Now, as for kind of Stamina Necromancer, in all honesty, it's one of the best just classes in the game at everything. It's just ridiculous how good this class is. Is it pay to win? It's questionable, but it's definitely strong, to say the least. And in Greymoor, it's no difference. Because, Stamina generally has a better single target kit with, the 2H skill line, Dizzying Swing, Executioner, Rally. Those obviously three things really help. And you've got Onslaught or Dawnbreaker. It just means Stamina Necromancer can use those skills really well. And its class kit, which is probably one of the best class kits in the game, which means it has crazy single target burst. And you've got Blighted Blast Bones, which, in all honesty, that hits as hard as an ultimate, if not harder. And it's every 3 seconds with Mage's Defile. It is such a strong skill. Then you have access to Spirit Guardian, which basically is a 10% damage reduction, which means you're really tanky. All of your skills have extra kind of percents added to them. So you might slot a certain skill and it will say, reduce your damage taken by 3%, reduce the cost of your skills by 3%, increase your damage done by 3%. And they seem very small, but when you add them up, you're getting, lots of 3% on lots of different things, which means you're just good at everything. And that's so true for Stamina Necromancer. They've got good self-heals with Mortal Coil and the Spirit Guardian, then access to Vigor and Rally, so they're one of the best self-heals. Their group healing is not great, but because obviously Mortal Coil can heal allies, as well as Spirit Mender or Spirit Guardian, it means that actually you can heal other people as a stamina spec quite easily. And then utility-wise, they've got access to the Colossus, which basically is major vulnerability. So it's one of the best group debuffs in the game. Like, if you land that on a person or a group, your team will wipe that group really quick. Mobility, they do lack a little bit because they don't have access to major expedition, but there's ways around it with like elude and stuff, which a lot of people use. So you can kind of overcome that, but the class kit does lack it. And as you can see, there's kind of a dual world version, which basically sacrifices some of that single target burst for just AoE burst, where you can use Dawnbreaker, Blast Bones, which is AoE, then spin to win and just kill loads of people really fast. So in my eyes, they're one of the best stamina classes in the game, period. Probably the best class out of all of them, Magicka or Stamina. And it's reflected in the rankings. Duels 5 out of 5, Battlegrounds, Cyrodiil, you see it, they're just really, really good. Even in big groups they're good because they've got AoE versions and they've got really good buffs that, you know, make a big difference to whether your sort of team is successful or not. So in my eyes, if you have one of these, definitely get on it because they are probably the strongest class currently in this game. Just like Magicka Sorcerer or, you know, Magicka Necromancer, Magicka Nightblade has kind of a duo sort of split personality where it's really good for certain things and iffy for other things, in all honesty. So as a healer, a Nightblade can actually be a really good healer. It's one of the best group healers in my experience. You know, they've got access to really good buffs. They can obviously give the group major expedition, which is really helpful. So they have some utility, but that's like the only utility thing they bring. But it's helpful. But the main thing is just the heals. The class identity is obvious what you are. If you're, you know, playing a Magicka Nightblade, it is really clear. The big thing, which is why they have sort of dual personalities, is you've got a bomber and just the typical Nightblade. The bomber route basically gives you crazy AoE damage where you can drop multiple people with like one hit or incredibly quick. So the bomber way kind of gives you loads of AoE burst potential, AoE damage, but you do sacrifice all of your sustain and your defense and just damage over time from that. The typical Nightblade using things like spinners or Necropotence, Armor Master, Eternal Vigor, those kind of setups. They're good, they have good potential, and that's like the word potential is really key because if you land the combo Soul Harvest into Spectral Bow, you will basically one-shot most people. You can do it on tank builds, on DPS builds, it's really good. But it's really awkward to land, but they have made it a bit easier to confirm kills due to the Major Defile added to Soul Harvest. That really, really helps. But they have lots of potential, just the execution is quite hard to play. So you find generally in duels, because it's just a one-on-one, they're really, really good because you've got access to, you know, the damage mitigation from Merciless Resolve, you got access to good heal as you do damage, so that really, really helps with the self-healing, and you got obviously bulk as well because of that. You got good sustain with Siphoning Strikes, so kind of in a duel, all of their kit is kind of built for one-on-ones, especially with the shade, which obviously applies minor maim to the target. But when you go into just more and more people against you, they're less and less effective as a damage dealer. And that's where you find more bombers become more useful for those kind of larger groups. So for me, a Magicka Nightblade can work in kind of one-on-ones and duels, maybe in Battlegrounds if you kind of build it correctly and you pick your fights correctly. But as kind of larger groups, you're better going as a bomber in all honesty, or a healer. So those are kind of my thoughts on Nightblade for Greymoor. Now, Stamina Nightblade in Greymoor is in a really weird place in all honesty. It's one of those classes that is just solo built. The entire kit is kind of made to play by itself or maybe in a duo where there's like two of you. But any more than that, they become less and less effective. And it's really apparent in the rankings. You know, you can see Cyrodiil large groups as 1 out of 5, same with medium groups. And that's because they bring no utility. When you're in bigger groups, you need to have lots of utility, and they bring none of that. They don't bring any group heals either. So in all honesty, they're kind of a very good solo class. But with that said, they have crazy, crazy damage. And I know lots of people say, oh, Nightblades aren't great, but from playing with one, just the amount of damage you can stack with no real penalty because of Cloak means you can just kill people freely, whether you're at range with Snipe, you know, which is really strong currently. There's loads of Snipe builds on the channel. You know, got the Bowtard, Shadow, which has stupid sustain and range damage. But you then have the normal sort of Nightblades with like Balorg, you might use Stans, you might use, you know, New Moon, for example, and they can hit really hard, really quick. So you can basically unload and just nuke people within 3 to 5 seconds and then go back and cloak, regenerate your resources if you need to, and rinse and repeat. So in my eyes, they're one of the best solo or duo classes to play because of that. You know, they have so many kind of just broad damage boosts and just really hard hitting skills that it means they're actually really good. Like Incap gets a 20% bonus damage on the target. You got your Merciless Resolve, so your Spectral Bow, which hits for like 20k. It's tooltips. It's really, really hard hitting skills. So in all honesty, the burst potential's there, the single target's there, but what they do lack is that group utility. So you'll find in battlegrounds people will hate you because you don't bring anything to your team. But what you can do is bring, getting kills, confirm the kills really quickly and efficiently. So that's your job, to kind of play on this side, go in and out, and then people will be more sort of favourable of you. But beyond that, as I said, they're just very awkward to play. They don't bring anything to the team. So in my eyes, they're probably the best solo kind of class, because you can pick your targets, you can reposition freely, but what they kind of do lack is that group utility as a result. As for Magicka Sorcerer, Magicka Sorcerer in Greymoor is arguably one of the best Magicka specs, just period, in all sort of modes. They're brilliant in duels because all of their damage is just single target particularly, and it's also delayed burst. So rather than kind of overwhelming people with dots, you basically just land lots of damage within 2 or 3 seconds, and you can end up, one shot in most builds, which is really good. You got 20 to 30,000 burst. You then have access to some of the best mobility skills in the game via Streak. You then got Dark Deal, which is phenomenal. So you pair that with Streak, you can get away from bigger groups with Streak, Dark Deal, and you're back to the full Magicka that you had before, and you're kind of away from the group. So it means that if you play the Sorcerer well and you use Streak and Dark Deal, you're pretty much unkillable if you use those things correctly, and you can basically pick off people of your choosing. Pick the squishy targets, one shot them at range. Anybody that comes with you or that chases you, if you can streak away, then you can kind of shoot that one person from range and one shot them again, and you can go back in. And so it's kind of an in and out, hit and run type sort of build. And with the pets, obviously you can see with the pets also, you then kind of have all of that playstyle, but with access to really big burst deals where you can heal yourself or you can heal other people with the Twilight, and it's probably the biggest burst deal in the game. So in Greymoor, Magicka Sorcerer, in my opinion, is probably the best sort of Magicka class just for all play styles and sort of game modes. It's great in duels, it's great in battlegrounds and in solo or groups and stuff. It's brilliant in serial solo, it's good in small scales. It gets less and less effective in large groups just because you don't have much utility beyond negate and maybe encase, but beyond that, they're just so good. So if you are kind of struggling, what class do you need to pick just to be really effective? A Sorcerer is a way to go. The only caveat I would say is that they do have kind of a high skill level in that they're kind of easy to pick up, but they're really hard to master. So it's one of those classes you need to practice and practice and practice. And I would always recommend checking out people on YouTube like Malcolm, who's really good on Sorcerer, like really good. Glyco also does some good stuff with Sorcerer as well, Pelican ESO. So there's lots of good sort of people around. Check out their videos, see their gameplay, what skills, what builds they use, and go from there. But if you have a Sorcerer line and kind of just your character list, jump on him now because he is so good this patch. So Stamina Sorcerer in Greymoor, in all honesty, is in a pretty good spot actually. It's one of the most mobile classes without a doubt. It's got really high mobility with Streak, Hurricane. The sustain is like, there's nothing better than it in all honesty. It's got Dark Conversion, I think it's called Dark Deal, one of those morphs. But basically you can just convert your magic pool into stamina, and because of how cheap it is and how many times you can do it, it's like having 3000 stam regen at all times. Like you can just literally combo up, streak away, Dark Deal, and you're pretty much at like half stam instantly. It's really good. So it means that you can really get away with like 800 to 900 stam regen, which most builds struggle with 1200. So that is quite a big difference. And then on top of all that, you have crazy self-heals with access to high health recovery builds like Troll King, Eternal Vigor, which there is a build on the channel that uses that, and it's really good. You then have Crit Surge, which heals you when you're doing damage. So again, really good with Hurricane. And on top of all of that, with the changes in Greymoor, like less healing in PvP, the damage for Stamtalk has actually gone up because people can't bounce back as quickly. So in the past, they lacked the spammable, they lacked a delayed burst skill, and people could heal really quickly. It meant that Stamtalk really struggled, but because people can't heal as quick now, they're probably one of the better Stam classes around. Like their burst is really high with access to amplitude from the passive, so they get bonus damage to higher health targets. So all in all, Stamtalk's probably it's in my top 5 to say the least. So definitely give it a go if you've got one. There is a build on the channel already, but as I said, it's just really fun to play and really effective. Small scale groups, it's just got lots to bring. As for Magicka Templar, it's in a kind of weird spot because obviously the healing nurse has kind of buffed it but also nerfed it at the same time. So in the past the Templar could get like 10k heals plus easily, but because of the healing changes, obviously they're like 4 to 8k now, so still some of the best burst steals in the game, so self-healing is pretty good actually. But what it does mean is that because they can obviously heal really well and other classes can't, their damage effectively has gone up. So you now see lots of Magplars running things like Overwhelm and Surge, Grothgar, and basically just toppling charge and jab people to death. And because it's just so much damage over time, with obviously the ultimate as well, Crescent Sweep, it's just really bursty. So it ends up kind of just melting people really quick in 2 or 3 seconds after that's done. And it's really, really hard to recover, regardless how much armor you have. So offensively, they are in a really good spot currently. As for kind of defensive, they're kind of as they were before. They've got really good buffs. They can obviously stand their ground with the rune. They do have issues with mobility though, particularly with Mistform being as buggy as it is, so they can't really get away from the fight, so they are forced to kind of stand their ground. And if Mistform worked, they'll be definitely better than obviously we've got them here. But all in all, they are probably one of the better Magicka classes. They're not the best, I'd probably say it's Sorcerer, but they are still really, really good in Greymoor. And as you can see in duels, one of the best dueling classes in all honesty as a Magicka spec. Great solo, sort of Cyrodiil or BGs, because you can heal yourself, you can do good damage, you've got burst, you've got heals. So those things are really, really important, as we've said earlier. And group-wise, because of all the heals they have access to and cleanse and purge, it just really, really helps kind of the group utility. They can buff the group, they can heal the group, and those things are invaluable, especially with things like Malakath and the dot builds that are going around currently. So if you have a Templar, you've got a couple of weeks left of Greymoor, definitely jump on it now, give it a go. It's obviously a really, really fun build to play. And then Stamina Templar in Greymoor is in a really weird spot. Historically, Stamina Templar and Magicka Templar were kind of built around your stand your ground class. Templar more mobility based in all honesty, and in Greymoor it's kind of just emphasised that aspect further. So you find that Templar, they don't really have as much defence as they did before. They've got Purge, which is just really, really good because it heals you, it gets rid of negative effects, it helps the group out. So lots of good uses there. They're really good sustain as well because of their passives they get, particularly with the armor buff. But what they did sort of lack is just burst in the past. Like they could burst people, but it was delayed. It was pretty predictable. Power of the light, toppling charge, or stampede, jab, 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 and people die. But it's pretty predictable. Because of the changes to healing though, when you land that combo, you might not kill somebody, but because they can't heal quickly like they could before, you're generally going to get the kill after that anyway. So because of this, the changes to the heals have actually made Stamina Templar more offensively orientated, and they're actually more bursty than they used to be. So if you're kind of after a class that kind of can go in and out really quick, Templar's in a really good spot for that currently. If you want a class that can kind of hold its own, sort of in heavy armor, sort of be like a brawler, Templar's not quite that just yet. So all in all, it's a good class to play, and you can see obviously based on the rankings, but like with lots of Stam classes, the more people there are, the less effective they get. Now many of you know that Magicka Warden is probably my favourite class, and I can be somewhat biased, but as you know, I've run this past, Zidane, is there no one else? His obviously Discord just has like 1,200 people in there now. There's loads of people who've seen these. So, this is kind of just an overview of what we all think overall. And, it's always a bit personal, but for me, Warden, especially Magicka, when this kind of patch isn't the same as it was before, it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. In Greymoor, it has obviously a good class identity. It's really apparent what you're playing. You use pretty much all Warden skills pretty much, which is great. It's got really good kind of group heals with, the tree ult. It's got Nature's Embrace, Living Trellis. It's got Budding Seed. It's got like a whole healing sort of skill line, which is really, really helpful. And so group heal wise, it's one of the best healers you can get. And that's same with group utility, because it applies loads and loads of group buffs, which, that's a kind of a big measure of group utility. It brings some of the best buffs in PvP. Major protection is, arguably the best one you can get. Chuck on permafrost with, a 70% snare. Nobody's getting away from those Zerg balls. So for me, it's really good in groups. And that kind of is the issue in Greymoor, that when you go kind of less and less and less people in your team, so you go from like maybe 6 people in the team to 3 people to 2 people to by yourself, it gets less and less good. And that's what Warden really is. It's kind of a group build, it's a group class. It brings really good just AoE damage, really good buffs, but it's never got an execute. It doesn't have that kind of final oomph to get over the kind of confirming the kill. And so I've done things obviously on the channel with Frostbite and a few other Warden builds which kind of really help overcome that, but you always have that limitation that as a Magicka Warden, you just need to accept that you're not going to be getting the highest kill to death ratios, you're not going to be getting all the kills, but you will get all the assists, you'll get loads of support and stuff. So if you're somebody wanting to help as a group, as a duo, 3, 4, 5 people, 10 people, the Warden, in all honesty, is probably the best class to pick because it's just access to so many major buffs, really good kind of group support with heals and stuff. And it's got loads of AoE damage, which is really good in big fights. So all in all, Magicka Warden is fun to play, it's really good to play, but it can be frustrating on a solo kind of playstyle where you're in Cyrodiil or Battlegrounds or Duels, because it just doesn't have the same kit that the other classes has, so it can't confirm the kills in the same way. If you've got an ultimate, maybe, but you know, that's come from a Magicka Warden main. But that's my thoughts on Warden this patch. It's good, it's not the best, it does need some tweaks in my opinion. And then Stamina Warden is in a kind of similar spot to Stamina Necromancer. It's really good in kind of all things, in all honesty. It's probably, you know, in the top 5 classes in PvP for all modes because it's just got great burst, single or AoE, which is, you know, quite rare actually, beyond Necromancer. They've got really good single target damage with Dizzying Swing and Executioner. You then got obviously the AoE versions with, you know, Subterranean Assault, Spin to Win, Dawnbreaker. So you can kind of play in 2 different ways. You then got really good defense because you got access to, you know, minor toughness built into your kit. You got a Shimmering Shield which gives you ultimate generation, which is invaluable, and it makes you immune to range damage. Got good sustain with the passives that you have as the class. You got access to Major Expedition, and it's probably the best source of Major Expedition because it gives you minor berserk, so you get bonus damage, and you get also movement speed if you use it. So in my eyes, Stamina Warden is one of the strongest classes in PvP currently, and the rankings really reflect that. As I've said, all of these charts have been reviewed by Zidane, is to no one else. Loads of people in his Discord, there's like 1,200 people in there currently, and this is kind of just the consensus that it's good at everything, bad at few things in all honesty. It's not your dot build, it's not your group heal build, but beyond that, it does everything really, really well. So if you want a class that's slightly stronger than the rest, just naturally, Warden is a really good class to pick. Now, like with these videos, this is aimed at giving you a really good overview of what is your class actually good at and bad at. And so you can build into the strengths, build into the weaknesses, overcome them, and it really just allows you to compare class to class. Like with these things, there's a bit of, you know, bias, personal preference. I do get them reviewed by other players to kind of minimise that. And if you do disagree, then let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And likewise, if you think, oh, that's actually really, really far off, then do say so, okay? This is what these videos are about. But before we kind of wrap the video up here, I want to say a massive thank you to all of our Patreons. Their continued help is helping fund YouTube, helping me make more videos, so it's really, really appreciated. And if you love what we do and you really want to help us continue to make videos more frequently and maintain the website and all that good stuff, then do consider donating on the Patreon. There's a link in the description. You get access to the videos early and all that good stuff, so it's a win-win. But with that said, guys, the video is long enough as it is, so thanks for watching, take care, and bye.